Good evening. It's 7 o'clock, and we have 2 budget hearings and 2 meetings, and they're all scheduled at 7 o'clock, so I hope no one says we're inefficient. I'd like to call the public hearing on the Cunningham Town Board budget. Does anyone want to testify on the town budget? Pete Resnick?
Good evening, and I apologize in advance. I've just come from the dentist, so I'm a little numb on one side if I sound a little funny. My name is Pete Resnick. I come here wearing a different hat than you usually see me with. I am on the Board of Rape Advocacy, Counseling, and Education Services here in Urbana, or RACES, as some of you might know it. And I wasn't sure which part of the meeting I should address, but I did want to speak early, and I'm glad to stick around if you think it's worth me sticking around for later points. We put in a request for funding from Cunningham Town Board this year for social services funding. As you know, RACES has been hit especially hard by the state funding problems. We have now reduced services down to simply keeping the hotline open and doing medical advocacy, so going out to the hospitals for folks who are over there due to some sort of crisis. So we have eliminated, for the time being, most of our counseling services. When we put in our request to the Cunningham Town Board earlier, it was aimed at mostly child and adolescent counseling. What I'm hoping is to explain to you what our current situation is just for a few moments and let you ask any questions, but I think we're supporting more or less the same mission and strategies, and so I'm hoping that you'll accept the application for these purposes. If not, I'm hoping you'll accept maybe an amendment to that application. The medical advocacy that we do and the hotline counseling that we do crosses over quite a bit with the work we do with children and adolescents. As you know, we do support services for medical advocacy for adults, but we also do so for pediatric cases and for adolescent cases that appear at the hospital. We do the kind of support counseling that we are able to do in that setting. And so that strategic part goes to the same kinds of issues. With regard to our support for victims of domestic violence, I hope you imagine that there's a lot of crossover in this area, that a lot of domestic violence cases also involve sexual assault. We have survivors come to the hospital with injuries from domestic violence incidents that also involve sexual assault. So we believe that the crossover there is pretty much on point. There's also the other piece that that I would say we're adding to this, which is encouraging and supporting appropriate social service agencies to provide additional economic assistance for people who pay out-of-pocket expenses for these medical and psychological services. We used to be able to do this on our own, but with the funding as it is, we can't. But we do provide training to our volunteers and to hospital staff for dealing with these kinds of cases, and we think that the funding is especially important for those folks. You should also note that we've gotten, through our work, much better relationships with the hospitals of late, and so we are increasing the number of medical advocacy calls that we're doing recently, and so this is an important piece of our work, and one of the reasons why the board decided when the funding crisis hit that this was the piece that we wanted to maintain was because that hotline and medical advocacy is the most emergent thing that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I'm hoping that you will continue to accept this application that you have in front of you. I know it's a great increase from the amount of money we've asked for in previous years, but this year it's especially necessary. We are tightening our belts as much as we possibly can. If you need additional or amended information for our application, we'd be glad to provide it this week.
Would you like to say what you're asking for?
I believe I believe the current application was for 18.6. I think with these current changes and the way we would arrange the money, we did a little back of envelope, and we could even deal with 17,000 as fulfilling those needs. But the number I believe we've put in the request is 18.6.
It was 18 even.
18 even.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So pretty much close to that is what we're still figuring. We are doing a lot more fundraising this year than we've ever done. We've gotten for hotline purposes a safety net grant from United Way, which has helped tremendously. But we are just hanging on by a thread. We still have quite a bit of outstanding debt.
Okay. There were some questions for you. Did someone have a question?
You know, I don't have a, is it okay to make a brief comment on the whole situation?
Sure.
I think this is exemplary of a lot of service agencies because of the state's inability to put together a budget. And we haven't completely finished compiling and approving the social service allocations, but one of the ideas I'd like to put out, in case we win the Carl thing, and if the state is still simply turning its back on these issues, one of the things that we could consider later in the year is if we win the Carl thing, is a budget amendment for a one-time infusion of extra infusion into the social service sector because we do have an emergency created by the state.
And if I can make a quick response to that comment, one of the things that we're most concerned about is that the state never passes a 2016 budget. And then we are basically in the hole for all of that money that we have asked for reimbursement from that we have never gotten. So with the risk that we will just simply never see that money, having a one-time infusion to bring us back up to where we were, even if they pass a 2017 budget, would be absolutely essential.
Diane?
What's your total budget? I don't remember offhand.
You'd think I would know this right off the top of my head, and I grabbed a bunch of papers. I should say that throwing me into treasurer when I volunteered for this position was simply, sure, I'll help balance the checkbook, and I have learned an awful lot in a very short period of time.
We've all been there.
Yes. Let me see if I have our...
While he's looking for...
Yeah, we're not going to actually do social services today, so we will take
do
your
not have
concerns.
the overall numbers in front of me. I know that our, just to give you a sort of hint, I just looked at payroll numbers, which are somewhat over 300,000 for a year. And I could get you better numbers than that.
Okay, just trying to put it in context.
Yeah.
Charlie?
Yeah, well, you know, I don't know if we have any amendment procedures for the social service grant funding that we do, and but given the extraordinary circumstances, I suspect you're not the only agency that would like to do some reallocation of any monies that we're able to provide. So we probably should talk to Kelly and Matt Regic and find out exactly what procedures there are in place for moving, you know, and what has to be done there. And so
We have requests. We're going to vote on the budget tonight, but we can always amend the budget later.
Yeah, well, there's that aspect. But
we're not going to do the social services tonight because we don't have the breakdown, but we do have a total for the social services that's in the budget, but we can modify that total if we can figure out how to pay for it.
You know, it's not just that. It's more like, I think the applications that have come in are targeted to specific activities. Basically, you know, here's an example of an agency that wants to move any allocation they get to a different category than what they've applied for. And I don't know that we have a procedure for that, but we probably need one. And given the extraordinary circumstances that that people are facing locally with social services. I would support that, and I would support allowing them to move around. So if our staff could look into how to do that, I'd appreciate it.
Bill?
I also think Roundhouse announced that they were going to close, so we had them in our allocation. I don't know if they were in our final allocation, but that may be something we need to look at too. I did find the races budget. It's like 400 or 395,000.
All right. And obviously this year it's going to be significantly less because we have laid off a bunch of staff, and we are reallocating everything to making, for instance, the hotline lean much more on the volunteers than we have in the past. So we're reducing as much as possible, but we are still strapped.
Libby, you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm trying to respond to the question on categories. I'm not sure which categories you're referring to, but categories set out by the Community Development Commission and our annual action plan are very broad, so any of these programs we've been discussing tonight would fit within those. The categorization that we'll need to do after you complete the matrix would be to determine which grants are funded by township monies, which by CDBG, and which by general fund. But again, you know, how much each agency would receive would depend upon your allocations. I don't think there's a process for recategorizing. I don't know that that would hold someone back. Is that what you were asking? Okay. Yeah, no, I think that with the information you have, you can proceed with your exercise.
Eric?
My impression is that we have not been monitoring within the agencies precisely how they spend the money and comparing it to what they asked for, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
Yes, we do monitor.
We do monitor, okay.
Like any other grant, we do compliance, and Michelle does as well. And yes, I believe we have good compliance. Once in a while, an agency is not able to expend the funds, and we have an ability to maybe find another project, but most of the time they do, and I believe there's good compliance.
So, I mean, I guess the kind of thing I'm thinking of is there's an emergency they have in the budget for maybe salaries for people who deliver services, and then the heating system breaks. And so do we permit moving around like that, or?
I'm sure that we follow what the grant proposal is, but perhaps within the agency they're able to make adjustments to accommodate emergencies like that.
Yeah, I guess because typically our grants are a minority, a small,
Exactly. Yeah.
not an insignificant fraction, but definitely a minority fraction of the agency's budget.
Mike?
So I'm sorry, I missed the first few 2 or 3 minutes of your presentation because I was at a charity golf outing, actually. So, you know, trying to do my part. But do you receive state funding on a regular basis?
Yeah, and as I was saying at the beginning, the reason I'm coming here and asking for a little adjustment in the way we'd use these funds is because we haven't gotten any state funding for 2016, and it's been a significant portion of our budget.
So are you aware, well, not are you aware, do you know if there was an appropriation for your organization in the 6 month budget for the organization?
Well, so
it was proposed but defeated.
Right. So there was the 6 month budget, and that did have some social services. There's also, I'm going to get the number wrong, so I'm not even going to say it. There's a bill sitting on Rauner's desk now, which is that did the social service stopgap and a couple of other stopgap measures that was passed unanimously in one house and some large number to 3 in the other, but has not been signed yet. That's still sitting there. But we have not gotten any indication that it's going to be signed in any order. That would provide for, I think they said 40-something% of last year's budget. So, in other words, by the time everything got distributed and split up among the different agencies, we estimated that it would pay for last July, August, and part of September. That would end up being what we would end up getting from those monies if that bill got passed, or if it got vetoed and overridden. That we were talking 2 to 2.5 months of our funding was at least the Illinois Coalition's explanation of what they approximated we would get.
Well, that's interesting because I'm not aware of any budget bill that was passed to the governor. Not a single one.
I'm glad to get it for you. I'm sure
No,
it's on
that'd be
my
great.
Yeah. But it has been sitting there now for several weeks on his desk and has not been signed. It was a smaller allocation specifically for.
That'd be quite interesting. I would like for you to give me that information because my information is there were 2 bills
Right.
that the governor proposed with no restrictions in terms of the reforms he's been demanding.
Right, and those were the budget bills at the end.
Categorically denied.
Right.
And,
I'm
not done.
I'm sorry.
All right, thank you. So those were categorically denied any kind of action in the House, right? So Speaker Mike Madigan, not the other Mike Madigan, refused to pass those bills. So you're telling me that there are budget bills that would give money to local organizations on the governor's desk?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Well, that's great. I mean, I work for a living, so I may have missed those, but that's interesting. So I'd like that information, but the bottom line is Speaker Mike Madigan refused the University of Illinois, all of our other universities in the state, a stopgap 6-month budget, refused to fund that. Social services, critical and essential government operations, refused to pass those bills. And so I'm not taking this out on you. I'm just using this opportunity to say the Democrats have failed in a huge way to fund government operations without any needed structural economic reforms in this state for a 6-month period of time. So seriously, I'm not taking it out on you. I would love to have the information about the bills that you're referring to.
So I was able to pull it up quickly.
Okay.
The bill is Senate Bill 2038. Its current status is sent to governor. And it passed the, I'm scrolling down, it passed the House 56-0. It passed the Senate, no, I'm sorry, I flipped that. It passed the Senate 56-0. It passed the House 111 to 0-3, which I assume is voting present or something
And so
like
what's
that.
the total amount of that appropriation?
700 million? Yeah. And that's
Okay.
currently at the governor's desk.
Okay. So that's a start. All right,
I-
700 million out of, 35 billion. All right.
As I did say earlier, I'm here with a different hat on.
Okay.
As treasurer of races, I am very strictly
Certainly
concerned
not
with-
trying to take it out on you. I'm just saying
Appreciated.
there was a serious effort by the governor, who has been vilified in this state by Democrats for not wanting to do the right thing, quote unquote. But in effect, in reality, he gave up any effort for reform in this state in the last week of session in an effort to fund K through 12 education.
Mayor,
Oh, no, this is, no, I will not be interrupted.
Let him
Point of-
finish, okay?
Nah, this is absolutely germane to the conversation.
Sounds like campaign.
Gave up, well, yeah, I've listened to yours repeatedly. So gave
not
up
campaigning.
the effort to fund K through 12 education, gave up the effort to fund higher education, gave up the effort to fund social services,
Madam Mayor, this
gave
is
up
not
the
germane
effort
to this
to
conversation.
fund a critical government services, and Speaker Mike Madigan said,
I think this is browbeating the,
no, I'm not browbeating him.
it sounds like it though, Michael.
Okay,
You know what? Hey, everybody pile on because it's 6-1, so feel free.
Well, you know, your comments,
could we just let him finish, please? Thank you.
Apparently not.
No, would you please finish?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. So the bottom line is there was a serious effort. So the last 18 months, we've seen this ridiculous political charade of trying to stifle a reform elected governor to change the trajectory of Illinois. And what we find out is the true political calculation. It is all about politics and not about policy, because he dropped every effort for reform to pass a stopgap measure. Stopgap, 6-month measure. Shake your head all you want. He absolutely offered to pass something that would keep the University of Illinois open, that would, well, they're not going to close, but would keep Eastern Illinois University open, would keep Chicago State open, would keep Western open. And guess what happened? The Democrats said no. They said, no, we're not going to consider that. Why? Because they care about politics over policy. And I'm sick and tired of it. Sick and tired of it. Not taking it out on you. I wish absolutely 100% that we could fund what's going on here. But the grim reality is the Democrats don't want that to happen. They are hell-bent on defeating this governor and driving him into the dirt and driving this state into the toilet. Now I'm done.
Okay.
And just quickly in response, I'm glad to take your comment, and I would hope that you would send your encouragement to the governor to sign this very important piece of legislation that would pass budget for us as a social service agency in this state. I very much appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to comment on the Cunningham Town budget? Oh, the supervisor. Michelle Mayoff.
I'm not commenting. I'm just going to respond to Eric real quick as far as dotting our I's and crossing our T's. In the contract that every agency signs when they are awarded social service grant money, there are deadlines in there that are supposed to be followed as far as like paperwork getting returned to us and financial statements and audits and those types of things. There's a certificate of compliance that has to be returned for every installment along with the agency reporting form. So I just wanted to make sure you were aware of those kinds of things. That is the paper trail that Libby, so to speak, was talking about, with how we make sure that everybody's spending the grant money what it was earmarked for.
Okay, Eric?
Yeah, maybe it's germane now because we have social service funding on the city agenda, but not on township. When you submitted your spreadsheet, and you submitted for 175,000, I'm assuming, and I'm dealing with it in such a way, that you meant that was the 175,000 that you thought was appropriate for the township, as opposed to being the total for the township and the city. Is that correct?
Right, was just the township portion. But as you know, I've always been a firm believer of the youth and the youth in Urbana and taking care of their needs and their health at the Urbana school, the health center, the roundhouse, I had in my funding, so that's 12 or 13,000 or something. I think that they had requested. Wanted to fund races also. They are the only social service agency that has called me as far as either dwindling down their staff or closing their doors, as far as agencies that we have funded. I picked the programs also that our clients do that are workfare sites, Time Center, Food Bank, and then I just hit the youth of Urbana hard because I think it all really starts there. And I think we need more mental health, but there's just, I mean, the reentry program, I think, is probably going to be a good, everybody talks about the mental health issues out at the jail, and I think that would be something to look into next year. Of course, it's too late for this year, so, but I just wanted to let you know about the agency reporting forms and this certificate of compliance forms, so that we do have to have before we can issue payment.
Okay, appreciate that.
Okay, if there's no other person that wants to comment on the Cunningham Town budget, I will close the hearing. And I'd like to call the Cunningham Town Board meeting to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons.
Here.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Jacobson.
Here.
Mr. Madigan.
Here.
Ms. Marlin.
Here.
Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Smythe.
Here.
Mayor Pressing.
Here. Is there anyone who would like to address the Cunningham Town Board? Okay. The minutes of the previous meeting, we have May 2nd, 2016 and May 16th, 2016. I think you made a correction to the May 2nd.
Fred did correct.
Minutes. Okay. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of those meetings as amended or modified.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Roberts, second by Jacobson. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. The committee to verify bills, Michelle Mayall.
Total bills for June that include May interim checks, town fund is $62,299.61. The general assistance fund is $18,162.31.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Marlin, seconded by Jacobson. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Reports of officers?
I don't know whether to talk about it here at the budget, so I'll let you know before you vote on the budget, is the personal allowance line item is the line item that we pay the general assistant grant amount out of. And that was, I think I said it in the email when I sent out the original budget about increasing the GA grant level from 245 to 265 in July.
Okay.
So I just wanted to point that out, that that was put in the personal allowance line item for that grant amount.
Okay. Any questions for Michelle? All right, we will move on to unfinished business, the 2017 final budget. We've had this budget for quite a while.
And the only thing that was changed was the suggestion that Charlie made with the social service from 150 to 175.
Right, so we don't have it spelled out how it's going to be allocated, but we do have the
Correct.
total.
Right.
Okay, so that says the designation, and then there's adoption. What would be the difference between designation and adoption?
I don't know, that's what they requested that was on the agenda for last year. So I
Okay.
think it's the designation, I don't know, of the final
Okay.
budget, and then within that budget is that ordinance.
Okay,
Right,
well,
I think
ahead.
designation actually means presentation. In other words, it's presented to us and then we adopt
okay, because
it.
we already have,
Already had it on file.
we have it on file. So I think we could move to adoption of it. Is it, Mr. Ammons?
What was the total amount for our social service budget last year? I don't remember exactly. I mean, for
225, oh, for the
Two- for-
the
township?
township.
It's,
It was 175 again? And so, and then you had set aside, Michelle, a certain amount for the rent assistance piece.
last fiscal year, correct? We're not
Right.
doing it this fiscal year.
Right, how much did you have set aside in that? What was it,
10,000
10,000.
last year, or
Right.
the one that we're in now.
Right. So why we can't just add that other 10,000 as well?
Well, I
Just-
added 25.
So I thought you just said
It was
175.
150 in the tentative budget, and then Charlie asked that it be up to 175. Because I cut the general assistance budget over $200,000. So more operating expenses, telephone, that kind of stuff, had to be switched over to town fund because GA is, the client stuff and
So I think the
personnel.
question was, what was it last year?
175,
Okay, so we're doing the same as last year, is that your
correct.
Yes, that was
Eric?
my question, but it would,
question? Okay.
so if we were doing 175 last year and the 10,000, so it's actually 185?
The 10,000 was in the 175, wasn't it?
No, it was a separate line item. There was
Okay.
the social service line item and then the rent assistance program line
Okay.
item.
Okay.
So the
That's
social
why I was
service,
saying, why not make it 185? That's what I'm saying.
Eric?
Yeah, I'm sensing the intent of Aaron's question to be, are we not, in effect, cutting from last year our total support for social services? Or when you adjust the rental assistance and the social service funding, is it coming out about the same?
well, when the levy was lowered in both town fund and GA, so I'm only getting a certain amount of money this year, which is about $300,000 less. So that's why I put the social service at 150 to present a balanced budget. So it wouldn't appear that we were using reserves. So since we have the reserves, Charlie asked to increase it to 175, and I said that was fine. So now we're showing that we're using $25,000 in reserves from the town, on the town fund side.
Charlie?
I guess the big thing is that we're trying to keep social services up, we're reflecting that our GA costs are down and cutting the levy and essentially cutting taxes by.
Which is that little minus on your
Right,
tax bill
yeah,
that you all
right.
got on the
Yeah,
township
so,
side.
right, yeah, so we've got decreased tax bill. So, I think we're trying to be very careful here and do both things. So, I appreciate just getting to 175 and, which is a 75, last year we increased the town budget 75,000 for social services above and beyond what we've done in the past, and we've kept it this year, continuing sort of like this one-time effect, and hopefully we'll be back to doing it from the city budget in the future.
Eric?
Maybe it's appropriate to note at this point that I think the differential between Champaign and Urbana per assessed evaluation, it's only about 3 or 4% different now between Urbana and Champaign. Am I right, or have I read those figures wrong? That we're very close. In other words, to see, we're very close citywide to being essentially on a par with Champaign on property taxes.
No, the city rate is
city
the
rate.
same, but overall, there's still a big gap because of the
park
schools
school.
and the park district and all the other taxing districts. The township has a higher levy than City of Champaign, correct?
Mhm.
So it's just the city one that's pretty close. And we're only about, I think we're about 13% of the total bill at this point. But we did have a decrease in the township. Probably the only one that went down, right?
Correct.
So we try. Okay, is there a motion? This is to adopt.
Seems a voice to hear over there.
Okay.
I was just going to move it.
Okay.
I
So
actually raised my
the
hand.
motion was made by Roberts and seconded by Jacobson, is that correct? Or who seconded? By Smythe. Did you move it or did? Okay, so you moved it and Roberts seconded it? Okay, is there any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Andrews? Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries. Is there any new business? Then we have the closed and open sessions to consider. Mr. Grosser, do we have a need for a closed session?
We do not need a closed session. I do have information that may be of interest to you. We can do it in an open session. On May 25th, the Supreme Court, the Illinois Supreme Court entered its formal order allowing the appeal. You may have read information in the newspaper that was completely wrong about how the Supreme Court could have denied the appeal. What the law reads is that appeals from the appellate court shall lie to the Supreme Court as a matter of right in case in which a statute of the United States or of this state has been held invalid. Carl had a right to appeal. There was no question about it. The significance of the date is that it starts the schedule of briefs and sets the due dates. Everything is measured from the date of the order, May 25th. Carl and the Illinois Department of Revenue, which also is appealing, have 35 days from the date of the order. So their brief is due June 29. Township and the city have 35 days after that, which means the brief is due August 3rd. Carl and the department can file a reply brief. They have 14 days, which make it August 17th. The state's attorney has changed their position, always wanted to be on what they view as the winning side, whatever that may be. So they're taking the position siding with the city and the township this time around rather than against us as before. So by my calculation, their brief would be due the same time as ours. The Supreme Court does not hold oral arguments every month as the appellate court does. They hold oral arguments in certain months. The two remaining times this year after the briefs are due would be in September or November, and oral argument could be in either of those months, depending upon how many cases are set for oral argument. Now, that's the theory. In my experience, one of the main things the appellate division of the Attorney General's office does is seek delay. In the appellate court, they sought and obtained extensions of time to the point where they had 165 days to do the brief that everyone else did in 35 days. And after their 165 days, they essentially adopted the state's attorney's brief. I have no idea whether they will seek an extension of time before the Supreme Court. I haven't seen them not seek an extension of time in the cases I've been involved in. The only cases where I would know if they sought an extension of time would be the ones I'm involved in. So it may be that it's uncommon, but my experience is that that's what they do. If they get an extension of time, extensions are generally granted in 35-day increments. Everything in the appellate court and the Supreme Court is done on multiples of 7 so that due dates don't end up being on a weekend. That's all the information I have, unless you have questions about anything else.
Any questions for our brilliant attorney? Nice job. Okay, I guess we don't have any questions. Yes, Michelle?
It's not at Fred. I just have, since our July meeting would be on the 4th, is it safe to assume we'll be the 11th?
Sometimes we do it on
Right.
Tuesday, but we'll talk about
Okay.
what the schedule, depending on people's vacations and stuff, and I'll
Right.
talk to you about it, so
Okay.
we're not done with
Either's
that
fine
one
with
yet.
me,
We'll beat
Tuesday
that
or
one to death.
or the following Monday.
Okay.
Last year it was the following Monday, so I just
Okay.
didn't know if that was the norm or not, so
Okay.
that's fine. Thanks.
Well, looks like we've come to the end of the meeting here, so there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.